Hey, what's up guys? Ravindra Joyce here, and in this video I'm going to talk about 5 mistakes couples make when they hire a wedding photographer. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, then go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll be sharing videos of this kind every week. A lot of things are to be covered at the time of wedding, and it can be really hectic, and photography is one among them. And many things can go wrong, and there are so many mistakes that couples do. And in this video I'm going to cover 5 mistakes that most of the couples do when they hire a photographer. Well, the first mistake that they do is hiring the photographer just before the wedding event. It's always good to book a photographer in advance, maybe 2 to 3 months in advance, so that you get enough time to understand what the photographer does and what kind of photography he is involved in, and what is the kind of image quality that you can get by looking at the photos that they have captured already by exploring their album or on social media. So it's always good to hire a photographer well in advance and not one day before or 1 week before the wedding event. The reason being, you may not get the photographer whom you really wanted to. Well, it's always good to have a photographer whom you know, or a very well known photographer, to capture your wedding shots and not some unknown person capturing at the last minute. So always remember to book a photographer well in advance. The second point is to hire the photographer and not the brand. Well, this is a common mistake most of them do, especially if an event is booked by someone senior in the family or of a previous generation. What they do is they usually go to a known studio or the photographer who does all the wedding event. It's always good if you know the studio well in advance and who the photographer is. But what is happening here in India is that people, they just pay some amount to some professional photographers whom they think that they are professional photographers, but then they don't know who the photographer is. It's only on the wedding day they'll come to know that there are a few people wearing the same color shirt, and then they are here to capture your photos. So don't do that mistake. So it's always good to know who the photographer is, understand the kind of images that they capture, go through their profile, go through their albums that they've already captured. It will be there on their social media. So go through each and every image and the kind of album, the kind of photos that they capture, the angle at which they capture. So understand how good the photographer is. Don't blindly go with the brand, because these brands can always fool you, saying, okay, we will make sure that this particular photographer is going to come, but on the day of event, I've seen many of them doing that, where they promise someone but then there'll be someone else coming on the day of event. And I've seen photographers, in the worst case, they don't know how to even hold a camera. It is just that just because you pay some amount to a third party company or a professional, the so-called professional photographers, doesn't mean that they're real professional photographers. So don't blindly go with the brand. Always make sure that you know who the photographer is who's going to cover your wedding event. It's a big day, so make sure that you hire the right photographer. Well, the third thing is the budget for wedding photography. This is a common complaint that I hear from the wedding couple, saying they do not have enough budget for wedding photography, but then they want all kind of services. So always make sure that you have, or you keep certain budget. I would say a realistic budget, not some small amount and then expect everything to be covered in that budget. So always have a good realistic budget set aside for wedding photography. Next is the Charisma album, the most expensive of all albums, at least here in India. I'm sure there are many more expensive albums than the Charisma albums, but then these are the super expensive albums. And that too, if you're planning for more than 1 or 2 albums, then always think about the budget, because these Charisma albums are the super expensive albums. When you're having limited budget, it's always good to have a good photographer and have only the photos printed. You can always think about the album later on once you have enough budget, but make sure that you always spend the right amount of money for the photograph. If you want to cramp everything into that limited budget, then most of the budget will go into the album and not the photography itself. So make sure that you have enough percentage of money kept aside only for photography, because the album will take a lot of money. But if you're trying to use that limited budget for these expensive, super expensive albums, then you may not get a good number of photos. Well, you can always get the album done later on. So always focus on getting those photos and good quality photos. So spend your budget in getting those images. The next thing is asking the photographer for raw images. Well, don't expect a photographer to give you those raw images. It's like asking them for incomplete work. How would it be if I give you a dull image which is unedited? Well, I've seen people asking for raw images. I'm sure you'll not even look into those images in future, but still, I've seen people asking for it. Well, how many times have you opened your own photo album? Do you open it every week or once in a year or so? I don't know. Well, it's not a good idea to ask photographer for the raw images, because no photographer would like to give the half or incomplete work to their clients. So basically, it's incomplete work that you're asking for. So do not ask a photographer for unedited, unformatted images or the raw format images. So guys, these are the 5 common mistakes that most of the couples do at the time of wedding event. So always make sure that you hire the right photographer well in advance, and make sure that whatever is to be covered in the budget is mainly the photos, and do not spend much of your money in getting those charisma kind of albums. And make sure that you don't irritate the photographer, because the more you try to cramp into the limited budget, you may not get those good quality images. So keep things simple, keep things separate. So guys, these are the 5 common mistakes that most of the couples do at the time of wedding. So if you think that this video was useful, then go ahead and smash that like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel to get more updates of this kind, and leave a comment below if you have any kind of questions related to photography, travel or trekking. Cheers.